All right, you ready?
Right.
Okay. Well, hello. It is that time. It is the first Tuesday of every month, and July 7th is where we are today. It is. I would love to have done this before July 4th, but hey, it's Tuesday, right? But Kevin Yaney is an author and a historian from Noblesville, Indiana, and he has a new trilogy of books out about the 4th of July, and I thought how appropriate. We are in the 250th year. We were trying to find things to do for the 250th year, and I thought this was a perfect thing to opportunity to do so. Kevin, would you introduce yourself and who you really are and kind of more of a background on you?
Well, thanks. Thank you for inviting me to be on the podcast. I love your format, and it's great to do local history. So, who am I? Well, I'm a Hamilton County resident. I have lived and worked in Noblesville. I own a marketing company. I've owned it for 30 years. I have always loved history. I was the kid back when we were in high school and everybody was sleeping through U.S. history class. You know, their head was down and they were slobbering on their desk. I was the kid with my head up, listening to all those dates and people's names and putting everything together. I don't know. There's just something that's been fascinating about history to me, and that's part of it. I love writing. I've always enjoyed writing. And oh, goodness, it must have been back in 2010. I wrote a book just to say that I did. It was a fictional novel called Memorial Day. And I had another idea about a Civil War novel. And I made the mistake of telling my mother after I wrote the first book um, that I had this idea for a Civil War novel. And she would not leave me alone. And so every time I talked to her, it seemed like she was asking me, "You have you written that book yet?" And so she got really frustrated with me one time, and she said, "You're not going to get it written before I die, are you?" And I that was kind of the bell went off, and I said, "Okay, I got to push through this," because I had started and stopped. On that novel, I had rewritten the introduction and the first chapter, I don't know how many times, added characters, subtracted characters, and so I pushed on through and I got it done before she died. So she was able to hear this, but it ended up being not just one book. By the time I got it to my editor, Jamie Whitlock, she said, "You don't have one book, you've got three." And so, lo and behold, I had a trilogy on my hands. And, history does that to you. If you're going to, I don't care who you are and what era you're looking into, the more you research history, the bigger the task gets. And so I would think, okay, I'm going to research this little bit of information on something that happened in such and such a town with the army that I was dealing with, and lo and behold, it would lead to something else. And so one thing led to another, and I ended up with a trilogy. So I called it the 4th of July. That was actually supposed to be the name of the single book, but we called it the 4th of July trilogy. And the first book is called A Call to Arms. The second book is Sifting Out the Hearts of Men. That is a line out of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which was written during the Civil War. And then the last one's called My Brother's Keeper. Those are the three books in the trilogy. Um, so I can tell you a little bit about the books. I give you some storyline here. So I was doing some research on a great great grandfather of mine. Um, his name is William Perry McLean. Now, at the time when I started this, all I had was just, over the years, my grandmother would say I had a great grandfather who was in the Civil War, but she never really said his name. I didn't know what his name was. I really wasn't 100% sure where he was from because their family moved around central Indiana, and they were kind of from the Muncie area, kind of Muncie to Marion. Was They were farmers. I knew that, but I had some really good friends from Fishers, Janet and Dennis Lloyd. Janet was involved with Daughters of the American Revolution. I knew that she knew how to find people. And so I just kind of tossed it to them and I said, "How do you go about this?" And they really got me started in a big way, and actually went so far as to find his Civil War record. So there's log books that they put information in. The quartermasters did during the war on each individual soldier. It's how we know so much about a lot of the soldiers in the Civil War. And then they went as far as finding his grave in Beech Grove Cemetery in Muncie, Indiana. So when I wrote the book, I wrote Will McLean into the storyline, and his brother George. So the story kind of goes like this: there is a widow. Her name is Louisa McLean. She is raising two teenage boys in just north of Muncie, Indiana, in Delaware County. They have a farm. The war breaks out in 1861. So the war actually happened. Fort Sumter was fired upon on April 12th, 1861. 3 days later, Abraham Lincoln called out 75,000 volunteers. And so that was kind of the initial call to arms. And then as the summer progressed, and especially as you get closer to July 4th, they started to realize this was not going to be a 3 month put down a rebellion. This was going to be all out war. It was going to be very bloody, and it was going to take a while. And so they started to ask for, in Indiana, 3-year enlistments. And so there were a lot of veterans who came from Indiana. In fact, 10% of the Union Army were Hoosiers. So there were 2.1 million soldiers on the northern side during the war, and 210,000 of them came from the Hoosier State. For those of you who are in Hamilton County who are accounting, there were about 2,400 soldiers and sailors that came from Hamilton County, and so there's a lot of history there. So these guys, first the older son George, on July 4th, 1861, writes a letter to his mother, sneaks off with his friend Chester Gerber, and heads to Indianapolis and enlist. And they get enlisted in the 19th Indiana Infantry. For those of you who are Civil War buffs, you know that they become part of what is known as the Iron Brigade, one of the most famous brigades in the East. A lot of fighting that happened, a lot of the major fighting that happened, they were involved with, including the Second Battle of Bull Run, or Second Manassas, if you're from the South. It's kind of where they cut their teeth in 1862. And then from there to Antietam. Antietam was the bloodiest single day of warfare in American history. For 12 hours, about every 3 seconds, somebody was shot. It was horrible, but they lived through that. Then the army, they were part of the Army of the Potomac when McClellan was in charge. After Antietam, he was replaced first by Ambrose Burnside and then by Joe Hooker. So you had both Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville that happened in Virginia, both Union defeats. And then the Iron Brigade was involved with both of those to a minor extent. And then Gettysburg happened, of course, in July of 1863. So the book really follows kind of a Fourth of July pattern throughout. Um, I remember visiting Gettysburg, and Gettysburg was fought on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1863. It was a Union victory. It was the bloodiest battle in the Civil War. It's the bloodiest battle we've ever fought in terms of American lives being spent. But at the same time that was happening, the Vicksburg campaign was coming to a close. So um, General Grant, Ulysses S. Grant, and the Army of the Mississippi had cornered John Pemberton, the Confederate, in Vicksburg, Mississippi. They had laid siege for 47 days to the city. People were desperate. And on July the 4th, 1863, so a day after the Gettysburg campaign, Vicksburg surrendered to Grant. So it was kind of like this high water mark for the Union. And so my second character is actually Will McLean, the younger brother of George, and he has enlisted and he ends up in Vicksburg. So the two brothers have both left their mother at home and going off to war. So there are letters that go back and forth between them. Here's where it gets into a little bit of a twist. Because the book really emphasizes some radical abolitionists that were a part of the Indiana 19th and some spies. So there was a group of spies that were formed in Virginia for the Union side, and they were called the Jesse Scouts. And what was kind of unusual about them is that they were formed by Jesse Benton was the wife of John Fremont. John Fremont was a radical abolitionist, the Pathfinder. He was involved with a lot of controversial things. For instance, when California became a state, he was the territorial governor at that point. And even though he was born in South Carolina, he was a staunch abolitionist. And he insisted that California come in as a free state. Well, that happened in 1850. And again, if you know your history, you know the Compromise of 1850 allowed California to come in as a free state, but the Southerners got something for that, which was the fugitive slave laws, and that really ignited radical abolitionism. You had after that, Bleeding Kansas, where Missouri and Kansas, those who were pro-slavery in Missouri were going over and leading terror raids in Kansas, killing people, burning things, and people like John Brown and his army and his sons were forming militia groups coming into Kansas and doing the same thing to people who were pro-slavery. And then there's some very famous bloody murders that happened during that particular time. So abolitionism in the 1850s, because of the Fugitive Slave Act, really exploded, and the Civil War began to be unofficially fought on that Kansas frontier. Well, one of my characters in the book is a preacher. His name is Reverend Turner. J.F. Turner. And so um, the boys eventually meet up with him. And what they don't realize is he has volunteered to be one of these Jesse Scouts, these um, people who are going behind the lines of the Confederates, dressed as Confederates, and they will try to either plant misinformation or gain information that will help the Union Army. And there was a lot of them that got caught and hanged because of what they did. But that was a real group. And Fremont and Jesse Benton Fremont were the people who formed the Jesse Scouts. They were actually named for Jesse Benton Fremont. So they operated primarily out of the Shenandoah Valley. Um, but these guys get involved, and our abolitionist, our radical abolitionist, Reverend Turner, is actually using this spy ring to go deeper into the South, find slaves, and run them to freedom. And so the storyline follows kind of a convoluted, they're spying, they're running slaves, they're fighting the Confederates. And so it's a kind of a twisted and turned story that you get into. So that's kind of the basis of the books.
Well, as I was in the, thinking, we're talking earlier about fictional history and whatever, but it's most history probably is to a certain degree because you like, for instance, one of my favorite productions of all time is HBO's John Adams 7-part series. I
Right.
watch it literally every Fourth of July weekend, so I just finished it again, and I have all kinds of allergy issues on the seventh one for some reason, but 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 the thing there, there's a lot of lines in it that are taken from writings of the founders,
Right.
but there's a lot of conversation stuff going on that there's no way anybody knew what was being said. So you
Right.
had to fill in the blanks. I think of my chasing my own family is, I have a lot of information about who my second grandfather was during the Civil War
Mm-hmm.
because I know when he was mustered in. I know it's because he was in the Indiana 80 Volunteers, and he was in a lot of the same battles that you were just talking about. But it's like I was able to trace things from that. But I look back at his grandfather was a Revolutionary War fighter, but
Mm-hmm.
I was able to figure out because he went from um, Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, then from Pittsburgh to Kentucky. And I'm reading a John McCullough book on pioneers, and I'm going, okay, well, that's where the launch pad was. This is where they went to the thing, So it was easy to go. Okay, I know basically the story. I don't know the fill in the details and make it fun, part, right? And so that's, and I couldn't figure out why he went to Kentucky. Everybody went to Ohio, right? So why did he go to Kentucky? Then I found another book on early Baptist or Welsh Baptists in America, and they had a big colony in Kentucky. So I'm going, okay, now you can able piece that piece together. But it's to fill in the blanks. You've got to imagine the blanks.
Right. Right. You do. And so I tried to I do did a certain amount of research on these books, so the history of what happens in these battles and the historical figures that are in there, they really happened.
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, for instance, there is a point where the Indiana 19th and the Iron Brigade, the Iron Brigade, let me just describe this real quick. It was three Wisconsin units and this Indiana unit originally. And after Antietam, the Michigan 24th was added to them. So by the time they got to Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville, and then up to Gettysburg, they were five regiments, and that made up the brigade. But it was simply because they had lost so many men, they needed to add another regiment to them, and rather than go back and recruit more of the same, they just said let's add this Michigan unit to them. So usually when you hear about the Iron Brigade, if you were to, for instance, to go to Gettysburg and go out to uh, the McPherson's Ridge and those types of places, there are monuments to them, and it always has the five listed. But originally they were four. But when they got to the battle at Chancellorsville, they were tasked with putting up a bridge, which was not unusual for Civil War units to, you have to cross a river, and they would take pontoons and lay them side by side, and then put planks across them and do it in a hurry. And that was one of their jobs. So I had that, and there was a house where it was a small plantation, and the people knew that a fight was coming. So the owner had left his wife and his female slaves there. He had taken all the male slaves with him, and he had headed out of town. Well, they uh, basically forced this woman to emancipate her slaves, and then they turned her house into a hospital. Um, and that was not unusual, but that really did happen. That sort of thing is written in the book, and it really did happen. It was part of the research, but that's what I'm talking about. I mean, it's layer upon layer. You start uncovering one thing, and you think, okay, they build a pontoon bridge. I'm going to write this into the book, and the next thing you know, oh, they're forcing this lady to give up her slaves, uh,
Right.
and they turned her house into a hospital, and so you write that into the book too.
Well, yeah, one of my favorite authors is Ron Chernow. That's why all his books are 1,000 pages.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah. George, sure enough. Yeah. He's done some really quality work on the Civil War.
yeah, he's well on a lot of things he puts his mind to, but literally, you look at the books and they're all that thick when you're bringing
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So this is not going to happen overnight. So,
Right. Right.
they are they out right now, like on Amazon, or how's it?
No, actually, yes, they are out, and I want to correct one thing. They've been out for. I actually published them in 2022, so they've been out
Okay,
for 4 years. But if you were to go to Fourth of July book.com, that is the website for the book. You're going to see them there. Um, so I can share that with folks later on if you'd like.
okay.
Yeah. But
I can also put that link in the thing as well. So just fourth of July books.com.
Fourth of July book singular dot
Okay,
com. Yeah.
okay. Um, So tell me, we were talking about some other things, and I'm looking on your website and was seeing all the other things you're doing. You're doing lots of history talks and walks and things like that. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, here that's I kind of fell into it. The first thing you got to know about when you're writing about the Civil War is there's been a lot written about it, and a lot of people are interested in it, so they've read a lot. And if you're going to sell books, you got to talk to people. So standing up in front of them, you better know something about it, or somebody's going to raise their hand and challenge you. Um, so I to sell books, like I said, you got to speak to groups. And it was a little over 4 years ago, I suppose. The book had just come out, and I was at a Rotary meeting in Muncie. It was a luncheon meeting, and this lady approached me who was part of a museum. And I thought, okay, well, she's going to ask me to come speak at her museum. No, her husband was actually the superintendent of Beech Grove Cemetery. It's where my great great grandfather is buried. And she wanted me to come and speak at a cemetery, which I thought was probably the oddest request I'd ever gotten. I mean, who goes to a cemetery to hear a speech? But she explained, and I got to talking with them later. Her husband, Beech Grove Cemetery is over 100 acres. There's 40,000 people buried there. And most people only go into a cemetery if there's a funeral. Um, and there's a lot of effort. if you think about it, and keeping it looking nice, mowed, trees, tree limbs picked up, leaves raked, all of that stuff, snow removed, a lot of effort. It's almost like a little city in itself. And what they were attempting to do is to get people out there for history talks. And Beech Grove has over 500 Civil War veterans. So they asked me if I would do a talk on the Civil War and then lead people through just a short tour of some of those sites. And I was like, well, I'm an author trying to sell books. So if you can make it happen, I'm good with that. I'll speak anywhere. And lo and behold, they got a crowd. And so I've done that for 4 years in a row now. And we always get a crowd of people who come out. And so I just started reaching out to other cemeteries in the area. Like I said, there were 210,000 Union veterans from Indiana. A lot of people actually moved here after the war who were veterans. And so our old cemeteries are loaded with these old veterans who are buried there. And so I just started doing some research on them and started leading cemetery tours. And one thing led to another, and so I have met some people who are actors. Some of them portray Union soldiers. Some of them portray. I got a guy who portrays Abraham Lincoln. One a lady who does Mrs. Lincoln, Mary Todd Lincoln. And so we actually started last year some Lincoln tours in downtown Indianapolis as well. And so those aren't cemetery tours, but there were three places in downtown Indianapolis where Lincoln visited. Most people don't even realize he was ever here, but we go to those sites and they're about 2.5 blocks from each other. So they're in a relatively small area. And then we also go to the state capitol building and we go to the Soldiers and Sailors Monument and all of the related to the Civil War. So so it's just kind of expanded. So I do speak to groups about the Civil War, um, not necessarily about my books, but about Indiana in the Civil War. And I always try to weave into it local flavor. I mean, if you want to go to Gettysburg and hire a tour guide, he will do a much better job of explaining the Battle of Gettysburg than I will do. But I can tell you who was buried in Noblesville, Indiana, who was part of that fight and who was wounded in that battle, or others as well. So yeah, we started doing these cemetery tours around central Indiana. It's not just Hamilton County. There's I got one coming up in Madison County and Anderson, and like I mentioned, Beech Grove Cemetery is in Delaware County in Muncie, and so we do those. And that's it. I have found there are a lot there are a lot of history nerds out there like me
Yes.
who really, really, really want to know how is my local history connected to the big picture, and that's what we're really trying to do.
Well, very cool. Do you know Doug Roush?
I know that name.
He is like the commander of the 19th reenactment. When he has done Conner Prairie's Fourth of July celebration several times. He's done Gettysburg several times. So he's pretty dialed in. So you probably ought to get to know this gentleman. But anyway,
Mhm.
so
Yeah,
but I just that I just was thinking you guys
I think
should
we might have crossed paths at the Civil War Roundtable.
could be, yes, but he's a what do you call it?
Calligraphy
Huh?
expert. Calligraphy expert.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So he can do that when I can't even read my own writing. So anyway, but well, that's awesome. So what do you have anything in the plans for what you're going to do next, or
Well, what's next? Well, like I mentioned, the cemetery tours are going on. I do get requests to speak. If somebody wanted me to speak, again, they could go out to the book's website, 4thofjulybook.com, and there's a form on there they can fill out to request speaking. Um, so we're continuing to do those sorts of things. Um, a lot of people have said, are you gonna write another book?" And I probably will one of these days. I'm not going to make the same mistake of telling somebody I've got a book in the works, and then they're going to do what my mother did and
Well, it seemed to work well,
agger me until I get it done.
but
Yeah,
it seemed to
it did
work.
work. It did work. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, I'm going to throw this out. There's two stories that I think are very undertold. That if you get interested in writing something, um, a gentleman by the name of Cassius Clay.
Oh yeah, out of Kentucky.
Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
that he is one of those guys that kind of stayed under the waterline of history, But he was almost like Forrest Gump. He was actually involved in everything that was going on, but his name didn't come up until the boxer who was named after him because he freed his grandfather,
Right.
So. But that's a book I'd love to see. And then another one is more on Caroline Harrison, the most amazing first lady I think that's ever been. Her list of accomplishments in 3.5 years were dumbfounding, So, but anyway,
Mhm.
so I just throw those out to give you something to worry about.
Yeah, that's great.
So anyway, well, thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed this. I think this was great information. I'm looking forward to reading the books, and see where it goes from there. Um, so anyway, and you and I will talk again because I want to hear some of these other stories.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Jim. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Thank you very much. You
All
take
right,
care.
take care. See you.
Bye.